when you know something, say something, and have the guts to get out there and stand up for somebody who can't stand for themselves. You know what I mean? And to me, that is priceless. That is priceless when you know that you have saved a career or you've saved a life, and after that, family comes into you and thanks you, and just, it's, I don't know, it's pretty humbling.
The Tesla Q podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended for and should not be used as financial, investment, or trading advice. Research associated with fiscal decisions should be conducted elsewhere. The host of the show possesses no license or credentials to warrant accepting advice based on what is heard on the Tesla Q podcast. Additionally, even though the host and guests may hold positions in companies discussed on the show, they don't have insights into the next time step of the simulation. Therefore, do not make any financial decisions based on the contents of this podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Tesla Q podcast. This is episode 43. We have a very special guest today. I'm going to be talking to Karl Hansen. As always, if you'd like to be a patron of the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/TeslaQ podcast and start making monthly contributions there. If you want to make a one-time contribution, get in touch with me elsewhere and I will help you with that. And without further ado, we're going to get into the interview. So welcome, Karl.
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Definitely look forward to talking to you, and glad we got to connect.
Me too. So who is Karl Hansen? Why are we talking to you today? I guess start at the beginning, whatever you consider the beginning.
Okay. Well, I guess that really is the question, right? Who is Karl Hansen? Because everybody knows Karl Hansen, right? Tesla Whistleblower. I think that's the premise for us talking. But Karl Hansen has been kind of quiet, out of the public arena, so to speak, if you will, at least on social media. But I do follow quite closely on Twitter. In fact, extensively. I follow that in media. But I guess people don't know who I am, and I'll talk a little bit about my background. As most know, at least, probably from Twitter and certain sources, I started my military career. I was a military guy. I'm a retiree in 1989, and started out in the infantry as a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. As a paratrooper. I also did a stint in the Coast Guard, came back to the Army, and ultimately retired. But I was an infantry non-commissioned officer, and ultimately ended up having a parachuting injury, fractured my neck, and I had to change jobs somewhere along the way. And I was fortunate enough to remain on active duty. I heard about this MOS, this job called a CID, U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, CID Special Agent. So I applied. It was an application-only process. Applied to become an agent. I became a federal agent. Short story. Working within the Department of Defense, specifically the Department of the Army, conducting felony-level investigations, a myriad of them, predominantly death investigations, narcotics. I mean, you name any major felony, 18 U.S.C., Alaska statutes, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, things like that. So I did that, and I was really humbled to have been given quite a few unique opportunities within that field. Did that right up until I retired from active duty in 2010. And people probably wonder, well, how does a guy that, did all that, how do you end up in Reno, Nevada? There's a little bit of it's an interesting thing. Let me go back. I'll cover the last, couple of years. I think it was 2008. I was overseas and working, as a field agent, and got tasked to attend as an advanced security special agent the 2008 NATO Summit under the Bush administration. And part of what I guess people don't realize, we know that the President of the United States has a security detail, and obviously there's the U.S. Secret Service. The U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, outside of its investigative arm, also has another body called the Protective Services Battalion. And the Protective Services Battalion is a pretty unique organization. And CID is responsible for the protective service operations of senior Department of Defense officials. Most exclusively would be the Secretary of Defense of the United States, then the Deputy Secretary of Defense. And there are others, but I was during that 2008 NATO Summit as an advanced agent, I attended with a team that went out there, spent a couple of weeks out there in preparation, and worked at the time with the Secret Service, Condoleezza Rice, President Bush, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. That was our primary focus, was security for SecDef Gates. And General Corelli at the time, great man, great leader in the Army, was out there. And at the end of the day, a recommendation was made that I submit an application, basically. And I was picked up and assigned to the Protective Services Battalion shortly thereafter, and moved to Washington, D.C. area, was assigned to work as a Protective Services Special Agent, assigned to former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and in the Bush administration, and then subsequently in the second administration after that was the Obama administration. I was assigned to same detail, but for Robert Gates, which was a very, I tell you, I don't tout it much. I'm a pretty humble dude, to be honest with you. But I will say that that's probably the highlight of my career. That opportunity to have been so fortunate to have been able to, well, number one, been recognized and then specifically told, hey, why don't you apply to come on over here? I think you'd be a good asset. And having the opportunity to, at that time, serve at the 2008 NATO Summit in the motorcade with the president and the SecDef, and I mean everything that went into that. It was so cool, and it was actually really cool. My kids got a kick out of it because they're like, yeah, my dad's there. Oh my gosh, he's with the president. And it was cool. And then I guess moving forward, I worked President Obama's inauguration. Was assigned that day. Was there a part of security detail for that? With the Secret Service, because obviously the SecDef attends that. It's a pretty significant event. And throughout I want to say in that second, under Secretary of Defense Gates, I was offered an opportunity to be part of a counterterrorism team, special counterterrorism team that they have. That's assigned there with the responsibility to conduct overt and covert counterterrorism surveillance operations for threats directed at the Secretary of Defense, and also where there's a threat to an army, was an army nexus, if you will. And that was pretty cool. I had the opportunity to be part of that in-town team at the SecDef residence. And it was kind of unique at times, being out there and seeing the Secretary of Defense of the United States hanging out, smoking cigars with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the staff, and then talking to General Petraeus and other people. It was a unique, humbling opportunity for me personally, so I enjoyed that up until 2010. I retired out of that position. And I'll say that prior to that, 2004, I was fortunate enough I had an opportunity in the Army. It was, the Army has a way of telling you where you're going to be stationed and what you're going to do. And so a branch manager, we call a branch manager, someone that selects your assignments, reached out and said, well, hey, got a choice. You can go to Fort Riley, Kansas, or you can go to Alaska. And I said, well, Alaska. Why not? Let's do that. So, the short story is that packed up the family and moved to Alaska. And that was a unique thing, too, because my dad was alive at the time, and his lifelong goal was to always go to Alaska. And I called him up one day, and I said, hey, you're not going to believe this. And he was retired, semi-retired at the time, actually, and had just bought an RV, ironically enough. And I said, I got orders to Alaska. He said, no, you don't. I said, I do. I said, you always wanted to go. Let's do it. So they sold their property, packed up everything, got in the RV, and we went to Alaska. My dad stayed there until unfortunately passed away several years later up there. But got to take Dad up there, and he got to experience the lifelong dream he had. And but I'll touch on Alaska a little bit because I think it ties into, like I say, in 2010, I retired from that role. I was, again, extremely fortunate in that, you spend enough time within the government or any organization, and, active duty versus civilian jobs. The Department of Defense also hires civilians. It's no secret, right? And so prior to retiring, while I was still in the D.C. area, I found a couple jobs. I wanted to go back to Alaska, so I found a job up there that I knew I could do. And it was a job called a medical evaluations board liaison officer. And basically what happens is the roles and responsibility, or the role and responsibilities of that position was to initiate, track, monitor, and ultimately follow through to closure medical evaluation boards, which are basically you've got soldiers coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. You've got soldiers that are on active duty that have injuries, illnesses, things that don't allow them to remain, on active duty. So there's a process. Basically, I monitor that, make sure the process is done, and that throughout the process, everybody, the soldiers taken care of, that nothing is missed, that all compliance standards are met with respect to their medical care, treatment, assessment, and ultimately following through to discharge, whether that be a retirement or a discharge, to ensure a smooth transition over to the VA so that they were entitled to their benefits, and that they received those benefits that they were entitled to and earned. I did that I retired in January of 2010. February 1st, I started that role, and I about 9 months I stayed in that position, and I worked about 60 cases. And senior official, a commander up there, the Warrior Transition Battalion. I don't know if you've heard of those, but the Warrior Transition units in the Army were created several years ago now as a unit that would allow wounded, ill, and injured soldiers coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan, or even here in the continental United States, that had injuries and such. They weren't able to perform their duties in their assigned unit, so they were reassigned to this medical treatment facility, if you will, or this unit that their sole focus was to rehabilitate, to get treatment, to get care, and then ultimately return to duty, or whether they're retired because they couldn't continue to move out. So anyway, I was asked to submit a resume for that position by the commander of the Warrior Transition Battalion in Alaska, based on my, the work I had done as a physical evaluations board liaison officer. Anyway, I was given the title. I was hired as a medical ombudsman for the Department of Defense, and that was a senior DoD position, and I covered down and had a responsibility for the monitoring of medical boards, medical care and treatment, compliance standards with medical care and treatment for the state of Alaska, with respect to all branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. And as you can imagine, Alaska is a big place, and there's a lot of military up there. People probably don't know that, and so it's spread out.
A lot of Coast Guard people, I would imagine.
Yeah, actually, surprisingly, there are, especially with the fisheries industry. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, worked a few cases, and I guess one of the things when I assumed that role in 2010, there were a lot of challenges. And this is going to segue into, I guess, maybe a little later, the Tesla situation. But let me just first, before I go into that, say that I've my dad raised me as a guy the bottom line is you got to have integrity, right? And what you got at the end of the day is you got your word, and you got your name. And people think that that's somewhat cliche, and I was quoted recently in an article that, the only thing you take to your grave is your name. Well, I got to tell you this. That's a fact. And I couldn't care less what anybody says. They want to argue that, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion.
The huge news story today, we're recording on August 10th, 2019, and of course someone's name going to their grave today is basically mud the world over, and that's Jeffrey Epstein, the child molester guy.
Yep.
That is the only thing you can take to your grave, pretty much, is your name. And
you know what?
Prime example on the other end of it.
Absolutely, that's a great way to. Yeah, it's a great way to, I guess, exemplify that, if you will. You're right, because that's what he's known for. But I speak to that because I really have tried to live my life in that way, in raising my children, raising my kids. Just the example, as a leader, and not even as a leader, as a human being, I think we have an obligation to identify what right looks like, and then operate within those guidelines. And it's not a hard thing to do. So in my position, as a federal medical ombudsman, it was important to me. I realized really quick that, I ran into, and I'd seen it before, right? But I'd run into levels of corruption up there within the Department of the Army, in Alaska specifically, that just, it would blow your mind. It would blow your mind. The level of malfeasance, and just blatant in your face corruption by people in power, general officers, senior commanders that are in positions of authority, all the way up to the politicians, the governor's office there. I mean, it was egregious, and I don't want to get into the details or whatever, but I will share this. My first year when I was hired into that role, 2010, I got a lay of the landscape. Now, I had been very familiar with that base and that installation. I'd served up there for many years before going overseas for a year. And so what happens in a place like Alaska is, you either love it or you hate it. And a lot of folks, they spend their career there. It's their last assignment. They'll retire and they'll go to work, on the base. They'll be a Department of Defense civilian employee, which is kind of what I did, right? So I still had a lot of colleagues and contacts up there and a lot of friends, and they were pretty happy. A lot of them medical professionals, hospital senior executives. And because my role was medically focused, that's where I spent a lot of time. And my roles and responsibilities were to brief military commanders on the correct statutes and regulations governing medical boards, medical care and treatment of soldiers. They know this stuff. They should know this stuff. But what I found out is that when, in certain Army units, under combat units that are getting ready to maybe deploy or whatnot, they've got to be at a state of readiness, right? And if you've got wounded, ill, or injured soldiers that can't perform their duties, but they're still assigned to your unit, then that unit is not at a state of readiness in order to meet its combat mission. And so that becomes a problem. And if there's a myriad of internal challenges, within the organizations. But one of the things that I saw was the rampant maltreatment and abuse of soldiers. And I'm talking egregious stuff. Malicious stuff with willful intent to harm. I mean, just bad. So this was rampant. And so my first year up there as an ombudsman, cut to the chase, I worked 1,100 investigations, if you will, 1,100 cases. I think it was right at 11. 1 year. In the first year, it was so bad. I'm not saying that those were all significantly egregious, but that was the number. The guy that was in that position prior to my assuming that role, when I took over and I looked at his statistics, he was there for a period of 3 years. And in that time, his total sum of cases was 47. 47 cases in 3 years. And
so they just weren't doing anything, basically?
Well, so that individual had some challenges and issues. And what you find when I talk about this corruption, right? So this kind of leads into, you've probably heard of the Inspector General, right? The Department of Defense. Every agency in federal government's got an Inspector General. So I have very little respect for the Inspectors General community, at least insofar as those that I worked with up there. I think there were maybe one or two individuals that I found who had the guts and the audacity to do the right thing when their investigations and inquiries found that there was wrongdoing. The problem I found was that a lot of times their senior raters, or the people evaluating them or assessing them, were in fact the very people who were responsible for the conduct that was under investigation. So now you've got a problem, right? You've got somebody who's afraid to stand up, who doesn't want to rock the boat because, oh my gosh, the colonel rates me. I'm going to get a bad rating. I'm going to get a bad review. I'm going to have my butt chewed, whatever. And so I found that, the short story is the individual that was in my role prior was pretty lazy. He was just lazy, and he was easily intimidated, and he had developed relationships with commanders and other people that basically he wouldn't stand up to them. The commander would tell him one thing, even though it was glaringly obvious that Soldier A was being abused and maltreated. But he checked the block, conducted his inquiry, and referred it back to the command for action deemed appropriate. Well, to me, as a senior GS-12 employee, within the Department of Defense. You're the senior dude on that in that state and on that installation, and you have direct access. You know who we answered to? I answered to the Office of the Surgeon General of the United States Army. That was my chain of command. I had unfettered access to the top. And so I chose to exploit that and use that to conduct my job to take care of people and save lives. And that's what I did in that time. So I say that, that corruption, I saw it. And I'll touch on, it took about 2 years, honestly, for people to realize, the Army there's mechanisms, there's resources available. People can go to the IG, people can make complaints to patient advocates, they can do whatever. A lot of times what they face is a stumbling block. And what I've found is that, again, for a myriad of reasons, there are a lot of individuals won't or can't stand up for themselves. And they can't or won't for whatever reason. They're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of abuse. And the retaliation was rampant. And that was the biggest thing. And so within an organization like the military, where you have a chain of command and you have certain, rules and regulations and things that prevent you from questioning leadership and questioning somebody above you in rank. To me, that was a crock of crap. What's right is right. And these commanders know you're in a command position. You're a commander. You say you didn't know? Well, you should have known. You're responsible. And so I it took about 2 years. I get off my bandwagon there, but it's a source of frustration to me because I hate bullies. And what I saw was a lot of bullying. I hate it. And I've seen victims of that. And I've seen suicides as a result of that. But the opposite side of that is, while I was up there in that tenure, we saved a lot of lives from suicide. And I could tell you a couple stories on that. But moving after 2 years, it got to the point where people, commanders, senior hospital staff, they said, nurses, doctors, people dealing with soldiers who had command issues would say, go see Karl, go call Karl Hansen, go over to the Warrior Transition Battalion, see the ombudsman. And so it ended up being, I don't know. It's just, to me, it was doing your job, doing what was right because it was right. When you know something, say something, and have the guts to get out there and stand up for somebody who can't stand for themselves. You know what I mean? And to me, that is priceless. That is priceless when you know that you have saved a career or you've saved a life, and after that, family comes into you and thanks you, and just, I don't know, it's pretty humbling. That's all I'll say. It's pretty humbling. And so it was hard work. Let me tell you, it was hard work. I mean, I was working day in, day out. I was getting calls all the time. And funny, because it's ironic, because I will say that I was in that role from 2010 to 2017. And to this very day, 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call. I get calls from around the world. Now, it's kind of segue into how I got to Reno. We'll circle it back. But in that role up there, one of the I'm sure you know about Chris Kyle. You know who Chris Kyle was?
The sniper, American sniper?
That's correct. Chris Kyle, American sniper. Absolutely. Great American man. Tragic story. But Taya Kyle, his wife, and the Chris Kyle Foundation, after Chris's unfortunate death, the foundation got together and they said, you know what, we're gonna create the Chris. I don't know all the business aspects of it, but basically the Chris Kyle Patriots Hospital. There were several of those that are now in operation, and one of those grand opening was in Anchorage, Alaska, the Chris Kyle Patriots Hospital. And I was so humbled and fortunate to be invited to that grand opening to meet Taya Kyle and senior Army officials as well as senior medical professionals in Anchorage at that time. And I was able to do that because one of my, I'm going to use the term battle buddies. So one of my battle buddies, it's a common term you've probably heard, is a psychiatrist up there. He was an active duty psychiatrist who I first met in 2010. That first year I was conducting those 1,100 cases. Got a phone call from this doc, a voicemail on my message saying, understand you're the medical ombudsman. I don't know what the F is going on over here in that unit over on this base, but I got a patient right now that's being abused, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? So anyway, I call this doc back. He and I are great best friends right now. He's an ultra runner with me. I run trails and mountain races and all that. And he's kind of crazy like that. But he went on to leave active duty as a forensic psychiatrist, and he's now in private practice in Anchorage, and was responsible and took part in the Chris Kyle Patriots Hospital opening. He's a staff psychiatrist there, in fact, and covers down in several other areas. And we work extensively with veterans. Well, Doc called me out. He's been calling me ever 2 weeks ago. Karl, I got a master sergeant here. I got a warrant officer here. They need your help. They're getting screwed. Anyway, what I'm saying is that this is carried over. And so on the side as well, what people don't know, I guess also, is that even though I left that role, I'm still working as an advocate and a consultant in my spare time, as I have, for free. I don't get paid for this, but I have such admiration and respect, and I know the culture that can be cultivated and the malicious crap. And it was funny because after I left there, one of these most recent calls is one of the former commanders up there, Colonel, called. She said, "Karl, it's gone back to hell since you left. Can you get back up here?" They asked me to contact Medcom headquarters to see if I could get them to open a position back up so that I could go back up there to be the ombudsman. And so this is true story. I'm not making this up, man. And I said, geez, I'd love to do that. And I actually, at one point, I tried. So moving on. Where was I there? Moving on. So Chris Kyle Hospital, I go out there, we stand this up. These docs are still calling. So I stayed in that role till 17. And then I was offered a promotion in federal service, a GS 1314 role as the senior investigator. I'm going to take this down to LA now, with the Federal Maritime Commission, worked down there for a year. And then, as life would have it, a lot of those people, the docs, the friends, moved on to other things. And I got a call from that particular doc from Chris Kyle, and he said, "Hey, you ever think of getting into real estate?" And I laughed. I said, "What?" I said, "No, dude, I'm a retired criminal investigator, blah, blah, blah." He goes, "No, I'm serious. I've been working this about 2 years, and we've been studying the Reno market." And so he went into real estate to help augment his income. And he said, "This Reno market is really good, and we're looking for somebody we trust that would get down there, that would be willing to get the real estate license. And it's the Reno Tahoe area." And I thought, no. But then I knew who I was dealing with, right? This is my good buddy. He's a man of integrity, and somebody I trust, and I'd go into the depths of hell with right now. So I said, "Yeah, you know what? Time for a change. Yeah, let's do it." So I rolled out to Reno, Nevada, because a trail and ultra runner guy. I was like, "Oh, Tahoe's right there. Cool." So in the meantime, I was doing this home study to get my Nevada real estate license, to look into this and look at his business model and work to develop that. And what I needed to do was to supplement my income. So I applied to several places, and one of those places happened to be Tesla. And I said, "Wow, very, very good." I submitted an online application, got a call that same day. The recruiter, got hired, moved in, and was doing that, was going to go there temporarily. That was the thing. Gonna just augment the income, go out there temporarily. Thought I'd help out. So once I was brought on board, my background and experience was recognized, and it was recommended that I move into the investigations role out there as an internal investigator. I only intended to work at Tesla temporarily, like I said, while I got the real estate business up and running here. That was the intent. And that has all gone to hell. I will tell you. I guess that's I don't know any other way to put it. Suffice it to say, I couldn't tell you what a real estate book looks like right now. Anyway. So I went in there. I was led to believe that there were standards, procedures, investigative procedures, security procedures in place, that my role was, in fact, to help protect the company and the assets of the company. I mean, that's what an internal investigator does within corporate America. It also does it within whatever other realm. But in that world, what I really learned quickly, though, was it was a soup sandwich, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry, that's an old military infantry term, but I was just dumbfounded. I learned that they wanted to scale the investigations department, which was why I was brought in. I was asked to develop best practices based on my expertise that I thought may benefit the Internal Investigations Department and the security apparatus there. And I found that basically Tesla's a big place. The Gigafactory is a big place.
Was the presence of the Gigafactory maybe a part of why the real estate market looked to be picking up? Have any insight into that?
Ironically enough, I learned that later. Yes, I had no idea. I'll be honest with you. I had heard of Tesla. Okay, I'd heard of Tesla in Southern California. I saw these cool Model S cars, and I was like, "Wow, that's a pretty sharp looking car. It's a Tesla." I didn't know what a Elon Musk was. I didn't know what a Tesla was. I didn't know anything other than that looked like a cool car. And so then I got here and I learned that, I Googled some crap and learned that Tesla was a pretty cool place apparently, and it was a great company to work for. They were very, progressive. People were coming out to Reno in droves to go to work out here. And so that is why I learned the housing market was booming. And so, yeah, the answer is yes. But things change real quick. My opinion changed real quick when I saw what the real operation was inside there. When I saw the leadership and I saw the lack of leadership, if you will, I saw, everything within that organization out there during my tenure. And as I'm told pretty much still today, is reactionary. That's it. Execute the mission at all costs, and the mission is based on our sales and our numbers and what we're putting out, and damn the rest. So, but I don't want to get into that. That's not my bailiwick. But real quick, I became pretty concerned. When I say the first couple months there, I was really concerned. It was clear to me that it was only a matter of time before something seriously catastrophic occurred, whether that was an injury. And I'm going to tie that into the knowledge I had about, specific investigations and criminal activity and ongoing stuff out there that I was looking into. Up at one of the sites out there, seeing shell casings and bullet casings on the ground, overlooking the Gigafactory. But we don't know on Tesla property, people up there shooting guns. What are they doing? I mean, that's just one example of some stuff that makes you question the overall security operation, right? So, where do you go from there? So let me just say that from an investigative standpoint, because that's where I started, I was focusing, right, on investigations. During the course and conduct of some investigations that are outlined, I will just say stuff's out there in the complaint that we just filed, and I don't want to deviate much into a lot of that stuff. But one of the things I will say is that as a former law enforcement official, I will say that I kind of know what probable cause is, and that's a pretty significant legal term. And I thought throughout the course of my investigations that I had developed sufficient probable cause to warrant further investigation, and it was significant enough that I felt we needed to bring in local, state, and federal law enforcement based on my probable cause findings and on an array of alleged crimes, which are in fact outlined in the complaint, right? Briefly touched upon. And I was led to believe I was given these investigations. I was, I'm not going to get into specifics on what I was told and not told to do. But when I started reporting up the chain, all the way up to and including the CEO and his staff, I was told, sit down, shut up, and color, basically. You will not talk to law enforcement. You will talk to nobody outside of Tesla. No, you can't do that, Karl. And, you keep your investigations. I'll just share this. Keep your investigations off this. Don't put this on the internal computer. Keep this off the record. Work on this at home. So those are things I was told. This wasn't my first rodeo, right? With malfeasance, corruption, and seeing bad stuff and red flags. I'm a pretty intuitive person. And so I started to see, I guess, if you will, maybe the walls starting to close. I started to see different behaviors amongst leaders. I started to be shut out of meetings. I mean, everything that goes into this. I mean, that a lot of people, I guess they're not aware of. I assume they are because I've been in this bubble for so long now. But I don't know if people realize the depths of the retaliation, the harassment, and some of it is it's not obvious. It's overt, it's covert, it's quiet, it's behind the scenes, and so many people that are victim of this, they don't pay attention to it. But one thing I will say is when I started to see this, when I was told that I would not talk to law enforcement, that was the moment for me. And this is not being arrogant, but I don't aspire to that. I don't agree with that. You don't tell a guy like me. You tell me to not look into something that you gave me to look into, and then you tell me not to talk, to report findings. Well, the only thing that's going to do is make me turn up the heat in my investigation. Then I'm going to start investigating you, and I'm going to find out everything about you and everything about your operation that I need to know, because I know you're up to no good. I know you're conducting egregious, I don't know, call criminal activity, fraud. You're doing a whole bunch of stuff. So suffice it to say, one of the things that I do want to talk about a little bit is I did start investigating a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of people. And I learned quite a bit, and I've continued that right up to this point, actually, extensively. And it's been grueling. It's been tenuous. It's been time consuming. It's been emotionally and physically draining. The entire thing has been financially, it's just been catastrophic. And but I know it's one of those things, you just need to keep going because you know what you know. And I've learned a long time ago in my career is that what you know and what you can prove are two different things. And so my goal and my objective was to find evidence to be able to prove the allegations, because you are responsible for what you know, whether you believe it or not. Everybody is. Not me, not just you, not just me, everybody. We are responsible for what we know. And when we have knowledge, and we know what right looks like, and even if it's inconvenient, well, you better stand up. We have a responsibility to stand up and do the right thing. And I've said this to my kids. I've said this to people I talk to and younger people I mentor, is that, sometimes you're going to stick your head above the crowd, because that's what you do when you do the right thing. And you're going to be the only one standing there, right? And it's a lonely, lonely, dark place. It really is. It really is. But one thing I've learned is that if you stand in that arena and you stay in that arena long enough, whether it's by yourself, the right people are going to notice. And you're going to get some help, and you're going to get some support. And you don't know when it's coming, but you just know that there's good people out there. And, my hope is that more people, because I know they exist. I've talked to them inside Tesla, the people that were victimized out there. I hope that they have the courage to step up. And I've said that, you know what, reach out to me. I'll interview you. I'll talk to you. I'll see what I can do to help. Because I am, in fact, still engaged. And I don't know if people know this, but there are people that are identified, and there are some that haven't been brought to light yet, that I've been working extensively with, legally and personally, to assist in their claims. So this is ongoing, but my hope is that, people see this and people stand up and they're willing to come forward. So where was I going? I'm sorry, I got on a tangent. It's a very passionate subject for me, personal,
Well, so that moment when you were told, don't talk to the police, how much more motivated were you after that moment than before that moment in your supposed investigator role, which apparently they didn't want you to actually work hard at, sounds like?
It's a great question. I'll say this. I had been motivated. Listen, I will say this, and it's funny you mentioned that. People have said to me, Karl, my whole career, how are you you're always so damn positive. How are you so motivated all the time? And my supervisors, I've never had it. I don't like micromanage. My point is, I'm a self-motivated individual. I was very motivated to do the right thing, to help the company, to save the money. I mean, the thefts were going on. I wanted to help the company, and I wanted to protect the assets, the organization, the people. That's what I did. And as soon as they told me that I couldn't collaborate with law enforcement, I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to protect Elon Musk. They wanted me to protect the company and the lies, period. The lies, the blatant lies that were being put out that everybody knew about. And that's when my motivation changed directly to finding out what was really going on. I changed the direction, if you will. I was no longer, I'll be honest, I wasn't investigating for the company. I knew what was going on in the company at that time. I was investigating to find out what the company was doing. And why they were doing it, and to expose the wrongs that I knew were in existence, period.
And I know with the ongoing legal situation, you're not at liberty to discuss a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
But in vagaries, is there anything you could say about that other than maybe just read the filing?
Well, in consultation with my attorneys, specifically regarding that, I will say that we're going to go ahead and just leave what's in the complaint, and let that be. I will say that, a lot of people didn't understand what went into this under Sarbanes Oxley. A lot of people didn't. They didn't know about it, whatever. So it took a lot of time. It took, like I said, 10 months plus behind the scenes working with, legal folks, other agencies, and the complaint is out there and people can read that for themselves. But I'm not going to elaborate on anything. If you have a specific question or something you want to ask, then we can address that and see how we'll go from there. Yeah, and you understand. You understand the reason for that.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'll find the link to that, and I'll include the link in the show notes for this episode, just so people can find it easily.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
What's next? What does a day in the life of Karl Hansen look like in August of 2019?
Great
question.
How
does that compare to 2018?
Yeah. So 2018. Well, 2018 was a year at Tesla, right? And, lost the job, was out of work, lost the finances, went to hell, truck repoed, all this crazy stuff. Actually, a day in the life of Karl is pretty much get up. I was fortunate enough to go back to work here recently, albeit at a significantly less salary. So we're trying to recover from that. So basically, I make $14 an hour, man. And I was a senior GS 13 employee. I came out here, was accepted a contract at Tesla, working for $87 a year. Whatever's in the complaint, you can read about that. But, it's day in the life. It's kind of hard to be in Reno right now and actually work with certain powers at play, to be honest with you, right? Big money players. And there's, as a federal whistleblower, listen, everybody here that I've talked to job-wise trying to find a job, they know about, this has been media out here, so this is, it's been out there. I don't know. It's tough. A day in the life is get up, go to work. Just now getting back into, a little bit more racing and running and things like that to try and work on my health. But I'm here to stay in the arena and battle these guys. I mean, that's the bottom line. I'm not going anywhere. One of the things I will touch base on, and I meant to, was that back to this investigative piece, when I was told not to talk to law enforcement, and one thing this is out there, and I don't, it's no big deal, is that, when that same time I was told, Tesla was bringing on a whole new security team. And, it's referenced out there in the complaint, but, it needs more attention, is the fact that Tesla and Musk hired former Uber security guys and investigators. And this is pretty significant. There's a document called the Jacobs letter out there that I would recommend everybody read, because I will share with you that when I turned and I started doing my investigation, part of my inquiry was into who these individuals were, where they came from, because the leader of this pack, if you will, was, showed up when Martin Tripp got taken down out of the blue. We just hired this guy and his team came in there. These are the exact same guys that Uber got rid of after a whistleblower complaint was filed by Richard Jacobs against Uber and this team. So ironically, these guys were forced out of Uber. There's litigation ongoing in that. But part of the whistleblowers, the Jacobs letter outlines what exactly they did, the illegal tactics, techniques, and procedures they employed while at Uber. Uber has ousted them as a result of this, and the same team is hired by Musk to come over here. And I will tell you, the Jacobs letter outlines what I believe they do at Tesla. I saw it firsthand, experienced it, and others can corroborate that. But I would tell you, take a look at that in your spare time. So these dudes actually, back during their time at Uber when they were doing this, they actually bugged the hotel room of a Saudi official during business meetings. They've been involved in very, very significant illegal activity. To protect Uber's former CEO and his cronies. And that's exactly what they're doing for Musk now. Period. And I don't think that that's been given enough attention out there, the significance of that. That's it. So I'm going to stay here in the what's next is I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to continue driving on. I'm going to do my best with the resources I can pull together and I can cull together to help continue helping the whistleblowers that I'm currently working with, as well as my own. And, as I hope more people come forward. And as they do, I'm here for them as well, particularly if they happen to be in this arena out here,
So you're almost like an unofficial Tesla employee ombudsman.
Yeah, I guess so. Actually, that's a great way of looking at it. But yeah, because you know why? It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's needed. There's a demand for such a position.
Yes, sir. I would agree. Ironically enough, it's funny you touch on that because on Twitter, somebody I don't know who it was. Anyway, said that Tesla just created an internal compliance department or something like this, and internal fraud, whatever department. And I just laughed.
Yeah, that came out this past week, I think. Or actually, they I think I noticed that they posted that position the very same day that your Sarbanes-Oxley suit was filed.
Right?
July
yes,
19th.
So Christina Balan reached out and she commented on that as well. And it's a job before you call or something along those lines. But, I think something along the lines of, well, Karl, now that you managed to create a department within Tesla to spy on all employees or something, I laughed at it. I can't get on there and comment, but it's interesting because there's also a study out, or there's a college paper that was actually done recently, and in fact, I came across it by Googling my name, and it outlines a very extensive study into Tesla's corporate culture and their lack of organizational compliance, ethics, and whistleblower, departments. And in fact, it should probably be out there, but, by a business management student, use my case as a whistleblower to do a study about Tesla, and their lack of, outlets for whistleblowers and, lack of policies for corporate ethical compliance and protecting whistleblowers. Pretty weird that I found that, but people can Google it. It's out there.
I'll try to find that and add it to the show notes also, as well as that the last thing you're talking about, the
Jacobs letter.
The Jacobs letter with the Uber guys. So just speculating a little bit, would you guess that the overall corporate culture of Tesla is probably a factor in all the executive departures that they've had?
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's funny you mentioned that, or ironic. It's not funny, but that in and of itself, and I'm not a business major or an executive, but I will tell you, applying common sense, looking at that, these are some pretty senior professional people, right? All these executives with great pedigrees, great resumes, probably a lot of experience. And to see the sheer number of executive departures in such a short period of time, bail out, that tells me that the walls are really coming in. They're closing in. And I will say there are other investigations that I'm involved in too, and with some other agencies that are ongoing here. We talk about that, the walls closing in, the executive departures. The leadership was non-existent. In fact, it wasn't leadership at all. What my experience and my observations were. It was a totalitarian operation with Elon Musk at the helm, and people are afraid of that dude. To be honest with you, they're scared to death of him. I think it's a great story. Great story. I got to share this because why not? So early on, when I had first week or two out there, I was still in their internal training phase, learning the facility, learning the operations. And so we go in for our shift, and there's a pre-shift briefing, and I noticed that there's security's running around, kind of like, what's going on? They're all excited, and one of the supervisors comes to me, or they yell, "Hey, anybody, we need somebody with executive experience." Karl, weren't you on the SecDef staff or something? Yeah, what's up? Well, Voyager's on his way. I said, who? Voyager. It's code name for Elon Musk, the CEO at Gigafactory, is Voyager. So Voyager's on his way, and we need somebody to go. We need there's a couple specific employee entrances and security entrances over there. We need somebody with experience to go over there and wait for Musk and not let anybody in and out. Okay, yeah, I can handle that. So I go over to the Gigafactory, get assigned to this, and at this point, all the other security officers are dispersed, and so my job is to greet the CEO, greet the executive when he comes in, and make sure that there's no issues. So I'm standing there, and of course I'm hearing that he's delayed. So this Model S rolls in, and prior to him rolling in, I'm standing at the door, and then the director of security, actually he didn't come out. One of the supervisors comes up to me, and he's from behind, and he says, in my ear, "Karl," and I look and I said, "Yeah, whatever you do," he says, "do not look him in the eyes when you open that door." And I looked at him like I said, "What?" He said, don't look at him in the eyes." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, no, he's been known, he doesn't like when people look him in the eyes, and he's been known to fire security people on the spot for this. And I laughed. I just laughed out loud. And I said, "Are you nuts?" I said, "I got this. It'll be okay." He says, "I'm serious, man." So I said, "All right, cool. Thanks." So he disappears. The Model S rolls up, and the entourage gets out, and they come in at that time, the senior director of security operations, who's no longer there, comes out. And I'm laughing at, with this, and I tell him this story, and he just shakes his head, and he goes, "Yeah, it's kind of the guy Musk is," type of thing. And we share a laugh. So here comes Musk. He gets out the car. He walks in. Door gets open. I look him in his eyes and say, "Hey, how you doing, sir?" Reach out and shake his hand. "Good," he says. I said, "Have a great trip." And he walks upstairs. Well, I look back, and it was like a cartoon, like something you see in a cartoon. You got all these security officers around a corner with like their heads stacked on one another, looking over to watch my interaction with this guy as he comes in the door to see it. And then after the fact, you're like, "Dude, man, you looked him in the eye. You shook his. You probably shouldn't have done that, And it's just a funny story. I laugh at stuff like that, but it talks about the guy wakes up. He takes a leak. He goes to the bathroom. He puts his pants on the same way you and I do. He's a man, period. Well, I mean, he's a human being, right? So at the end of the day, no big deal, no big deal. But that speaks to the culture inside the organization. And that's one of the things that I learned real quick is that culture permeated. That is the intimidation factor that has been created by Musk's actions and treatment of employees. You can't argue that, right? This is leadership 101. This is human behavior 101. And it's almost, I will say, because I'm not even going to get into it, but what I will say is this is, when you look at cults, when you look at the study of different things, you see this blind loyalty and blind following and this fear and intimidation that's instilled in people. And to see that in a corporate work culture is absolutely disgusting to me. We see it in criminal organizations, but to see that in a corporate culture, it's sad. People afraid to speak out, people afraid to report injuries, people afraid to question things, talk about what they see. What kind of operation is that? I mean, I don't know what individual in their right mind in a leadership role of such an operation, any operation, Tesla, whatever, would expect that that's okay and that's going to ultimately allow them to reach their end state goals and accomplish their mission, because it's not. I mean, history has proven that over and over again. It won't. Ultimately, the empire is going to fall. The house of cards are going to come down, because you can't sustain that, right? It's unsustainable. Now, with somebody like this, where you're a billionaire and you got resources, I mean, unlimited, sure, you can sustain for a long time. Power, money, control, ego, and narcissism. That's what that is, period. And I've seen it. I've taken down, and I don't mean to say taken down, but I've been part of several investigations back in that ombudsman role, involving the ultimate, prosecution and termination of major generals one-star generals, senior officials in the Alaska National Guard, significant multi-year investigation involving the FBI that I was involved in regarding the rampant sexual assault and cover-up of women in the National Guard in Alaska. Also involved drug dealing by members of that organization, cartel members, different things like that, drug trafficking into Alaska. And, I represented those victims as an ombudsman, those female victims. Ironically, that case, I'll touch on that a little bit because it talks about who I am. They got away with that shit for a long time, and it reached the governor's office. Eventually, even their house of cards came down. They really did. So this is a great story. I was short and sweet, and I got the chaplain, 2 state chaplains for the Alaska National Guard, field grade officers, came to my office as an ombudsman, wanted to report that they felt that the commanding general was covering up crimes because of his former position as a senior police captain up there, and that he was allowing and condoning ongoing criminal activity to go on. So we moved forward. I took part in an investigation, represented the victims, and at the end of the day, people can Google that, but at the end of the day, after 3 years, the federal government got involved, the National Guard Bureau, Office of Complex Investigations, and sent a team up there that I worked with to fully investigate the allegations up to the governor's office, because the National Guard is a state organization, right? The commander in chief of that is the governor. So, bottom line is the governor was forced out of office. The adjutant general, Major General Tom Tatkus, was relieved of his responsibilities, a 1-star general, several senior commanders, colonels, field grade officers, as well as many subordinate leaders, people that were protecting them, getting away with it for a long time. So bottom line there, the message is, I don't give up. When these victims and these women came to my office and were brought by the chaplain, they'd reported this for years to the governor's office, to law enforcement, to everything. And so, after a lot of time of digging and cultivating resources that I had previously worked with, that's kind of how that whole thing started. I reached out to somebody who knew somebody, and I intend to do the same in this case. I am going to work diligently, persistently, and period. I honestly don't give a damn what Musk tries. He's tried quite a bit that people aren't aware of over the last year. And at the end of the day, that's fine. I'm not going anywhere. I will continue to do what I have to do to obtain what I need to, the resources to do and continue this fight. Not for me, but for everybody else. It's those unsung or those quiet people that are afraid, that are bullied, that are intimidated. And that just motivates the hell out of me, man.
Indeed. So you've got a GoFundMe campaign.
I do.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Give it a quick plug.
Yeah, I will. I was asked, it was brought to my attention that I should do that a long time ago, by somebody we all know out there. But anyway, and Karl, you need help. And it's, no, we're good. So it got to a point that, after my truck was repossessed, after all this stuff, and it went down. I got to the point where I swallowed some pride and I said, you know what, let me tell people a little bit about who I am and see if maybe we can get some help here. Legally, financially, and whatnot, to cover a lot of those costs and different things. And so, I created that GoFundMe, and it was a huge initial outpouring that I can't begin to say how thankful I can't convey, to be honest with you, the words of thanks. Words don't seem to cut it. But that, I'll tell you, that initial rapid, all the donations, the support, the comments from people who left donations. I so wanted to get out there, on Twitter and thank everybody. But that saved my ass, quite frankly, initially. And got the wolf off the back door initially, to a certain extent. Got my rent paid up, kept me from being evicted. I mean, I was literally $11,000 behind in rent, man. And that got caught up. My vehicle, different things, ongoing, expenses. But, the common denominator, I guess with whistleblowers is that someone with unlimited resources, they try to destroy them. They try to take them out, and they keep coming and coming and coming. And so, that whistleblowers ultimately give up, right? And that's what I think their goal is, or was, probably still is with me. But I'm not going away, and I need more help. I mean, that's it. I'm still, that was enough to be like, okay, hey, get the wolf off the door for a month or two. And now recently going back to work, we're good. We got a little bit coming in, I'm making 14 an hour, working almost 40, but hey, it is what it is. It's a job, and I'm working. I'm so thankful for that. But there's still a whole lot out there, that I could use some help with. So I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm begging. I'll talk on it. I had to swallow some pride, and I am so amazingly thankful to everybody. So if anybody who hears this, who has donated, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because quite honestly, you saved me from some pretty significant crap, and you got things moving forward again. And so as we move forward and continue to fight, my goal is to continue just doing that, and if people would be inclined to continue to support that, would be extremely helpful in so many ways. And
you'll keep providing updates on that page, I'm sure, right, as you go forward?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
As you're able to, of course.
That's correct. Yeah. And listen, man, I'll fight with or without, but at the end of the day, it's just a huge benefit for me to know, the support out there, whether it's financial. I'm talking the financial piece, absolutely awesome, right? But I'm going to tell you that emotional charge that I get from the commentary, from the support, just seeing people out there writing things, sending me little notes and messages, whether they donate or not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking outside of that. That is more meaningful to me, because the emotional toil, I'm going to be quite frank with you, over this last year plus has been, I've been through a lot of shit in my life, brother. I've dealt with a lot of stuff. This has been a test for Karl. This has been a test. And, that's all I can say to that. It's been a test, that something totally and completely, even though I was aware of it, even though I dealt in it and I'd helped other people in that arena, it's a different animal. And that emotional charge, man, so please, if whatever, man, reach out, support that just gives me motivation and drive. And inspires me, man. It makes me smile when I wake up. It makes me have a little bit more motivation and passion, So bottom line is, Karl's not giving up. I'm here. And,
and you
either
appreciate
way,
everything.
Either way, but I appreciate everything. And like I say, either way, that help means everything to me. Yeah, financially, kind words, whatever. I love getting on Twitter every morning and scrolling through the feeds and just reading. I'll tell you, man, it is so hard for me, right? Because I've been so quiet for so long, and people that know me, they're like, Karl, I know this is hard for you, but yeah, and I know I do it for a reason, right? Because it's the right thing to do. But man, it's hard. I want to get out there and I want to praise and I want to thank and I want to do all that. So please let your listeners know, and hopefully they hear this. They'll know that I am eternally grateful. And moving forward, I continue to want to represent and help and advocate for not only whistleblowers, but whistleblowers at Tesla, wherever. I think the myriad of experience that I've and wisdom I've learned through this process has been such that, combined with my background, I am able to adequately and sufficiently help people who may need help in that arena. So, on that note, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. So we're at about an hour and 8 minutes now. Just I know there's been a lot of things that you haven't been able to say, but assuming there weren't any legal, assuming there weren't legal reasons for you not to say everything, how long could you talk about this? Like, how many hours of an episode could this have been?
To be honest with you, if I had no constraints, and I mean, I plan on writing a book someday, but we could talk for hours. I could literally talk days, to be honest with you. Days. You have to understand that, you know, I've been engaged in this for so long that the amount of evidentiary material and other material that I've collected, that I've gone through, that I've pieced together, that you should see my living room and my dining room. The walls literally look like an investigative field office working a major crimes task force. I swear to God, I mean, link analysis, the whole 9 yards, and I mean, hours on it. So I could talk for days. My poor attorneys, it was funny. We go back to the beginning of this, and because nobody knew SOX was even on the playing field, I don't think. That came totally out of left field. So in preparation for all of this, my legal folks, it took me 2 months to compile 20 binders of evidentiary material that I submitted to them, and I UPS them down there in big boxes, and with 1 inch plus binders and collated different, just organized. So my lawyer gets this, and I get a phone call. He's like, never in my entire career have I had a client who's so whatever. Anyway, he was amazing. It was very helpful to them. And the paralegal actually said to me, Karl, you trying to take my job? It was pretty funny. It was just a good laughing thing. But no, it's just what I do, right? Probably people would say I'm nuts. In fact, a lot have. My kids tell me I'm crazy. Dad, you're too thorough. Well, it can be a blessing or a curse, I guess. But in this case, it is what it is.
I think it'll come in handy ultimately.
I'll do 10 episodes for you, man. We can do it as time goes on.
All right.
I tell you, it's funny. It's kind of like the Theranos book. You ever read Theranos? You ever read about Theranos?
I still haven't read that. The John Carreyrou Bad Blood?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I started that, and I listened to it on Audible, but I will tell you the similarities. That's one thing that I've told some people is that the similarities, I was getting chills listening to that book on audio. It'll just blow your mind. I'd recommend people give it a read if they want an insight into the corporate culture inside of Tesla. I mean, it's the same. It's unbelievable. So.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way from everything that I've observed from afar. But
yes, sir.
You definitely have a lot more inside knowledge of everything. So you've lived through it.
Yeah, and I wish I could share everything that's still ongoing, and I will someday. But right now, obviously, I promise I will. And it's a lot of restraint not to, but it will happen. And hopefully you'll give me the opportunity when that time is out there to come back on and we can revisit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Well, it's been good talking to you. I think
sure.
We'll wrap up this episode. Any last things you want to say before we close it out?
I want to say thank you. Period. I don't need to get into a long diatribe. I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to you. And I wish everybody well. And I'm so thankful for the ongoing support. And just know, I will say that look, when I'm in the arena, and I'll cross the finish line, whether it be first or whether it be last. And I want anybody that wants to join me, and I hope that other people stand up. And, I do encourage people to stand up, to speak out, to get a hold of me if they feel that they need to do that. And to everyone out there, keep up your good work in all areas that you're focused on, especially the Tesla Q folks. That's what I'm talking to, those guys. Absolutely. The Q crowd, oh my goodness, absolutely phenomenal folks out there. Very, very smart people. And I'm humbled to be, and they're onto a lot of shit. And so it's tough in the sense that some of the stuff I see out there from these very highly intelligent, very smart, cute people, and they bring this stuff out there, and there's so much that I'm like, oh man, I wish I could comment that. I know a little bit about that. I know I could add to that. I could, so there's a lot of information out there, and a lot that I still have that we'll talk about someday. But that's all I want to say. Thank you so much, and look forward to you getting this out there.
All right. I do too.
All right.
Everybody listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Karl, especially emotionally, and keep doing that. And any other people out there who might listen to this that have information that might pertain to any of the things that Karl's investigating, don't be afraid to speak out. There are people out there that are willing to help you and support you, and don't let wrongness continue. I mean, flat out. If you see something
Absolutely.
that's wrong, speak out. And with that, we'll call this episode number 43 of the Tesla Q podcast. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.